over more than 1 week. And so we came into work today on Friday to assure that we didn't have bills roll over. Because we had a little bit of a bubble in last week's committee work that gave us more bills than we had had the prior 4 weeks to deal with on the floor. So with that, a long answer to say, I feel very good about where we are on schedule. And as I said starting out, we have a tentative schedule for dealing with the budget bills, the supplemental, that will all begin not this coming week, but the following week in committee, and then the week after that, 3 weeks from today, which is the week before Memorial Day break, on the floor in dealing with both supplemental and the HB1 for the 10-11 year. And so that's where we are, and we feel real good about that. Jim Fannin and the Appropriations Committee, which Bodie serves on, has been working very diligently to, get to where we feel like we have a plan that we can present to the public, and that's our schedule for doing that. So on the budget stuff, I feel very good. On the general bill calendar, some committees are better off than others. Some committees you'll see this week taking up significantly more Senate bills because they've cleared their House calendars. So in fact, we're a little bit ahead on taking up Senate bills. If there's any concern that I have, it's probably that with the Senate taking off these days to do what they're doing, looking at the oil spill or whatever else they've been working on, that if we get another big bubble of things coming over because they're delayed in the end of June, we may have, we may have two things happening. We may have a lull on the House side because we've gotten ahead of them, just in the back and forth flow of bills, or we may end up with a bulge if the Senate goes to ramping up and moving bills through in a hurry. And so we'll just have to deal with that as it comes along. A couple of things I want to talk about, though, that happened this week. We haven't talked about this week's stuff. We a couple of key bills to give public schools more flexibility and autonomy and student performance was passed. Raising the age of 18 for unrestricted driver's license. That came out of transportation and is going to the floor next week. We have a vote change rule on the House side that will be debated next week. Robert wrote on it. I didn't see anything anywhere else on the process in the House. The old process was there was no public comment, no nothing. You just asked the clerk to change your vote. Could be any day during the session for prior days' work. We changed that because we didn't think that was working to give best public disclosure. And so we went to the process we have now, which is a member on the same day can only change his vote by going to the mic and making a motion to change his vote, as all y'all are very well aware. That has not worked out the way I really anticipated it would, and so we're talking amongst ourselves, trying to figure out what is appropriate in how a member has the ability to change his vote. There are times when a member needs to change his vote. That makes perfectly good sense. If he was in the bathroom, or if he was over on the Senate, and is, or he, was just made a mistake because he was dealing with his piece of legislation that's coming up next, and staff was in his ear, or he was talking to y'all, or whatever the case would be. There are times when it warrants a vote change, but we're not getting that clarity for reason out of the existing system. And so we passed an HR out of House and Governmental, which basically models after the Senate, where the Senate doesn't allow you to change your vote at all. To basically have a discussion with the members, a public discussion with the members on Monday about what should we do in that area. And I imagine we'll modify it from what the Senate does, but move, I hope, in that direction to better the system dealing with vote changing. We passed a couple of other bills dealing with the Board of Ethics and kind of doing some tweaking, clearing up in that area. John Schroeder's bill on unpaid holiday leaves. I have not seen the substitute bill, so I don't know exactly what he ended up doing in that committee. But apparently it got to the point where it passed unanimously, so they must have worked something out on that. We had had many emails and phone calls on that bill, as you can well imagine, from civil service employees. And I think where we ended up most likely, since it came out unanimously, being a bill that most everyone can live with. We also passed the GRAD Act, which was a major hurdle yesterday out of committee. Although I got to tell you all, and I got to go back and read it. The reporting that I read on it yesterday, or excuse me, this morning, led me to believe, just reading the story, that the amendments that were put on in committee yesterday kind of watered the bill down. And I don't think that's the case at all. Maybe I misread it, and I'll go back and look at it again. The amendments that we put on the bill made performance tantamount before you can get the increase in funding. And that was not the way the bill was originally drafted. The universities and colleges are not real happy with the amendments, but for a number of different reasons. Most importantly, I think you pay for performance. You don't pay and then perform. It was important to get that straight in the bill. And the universities will be just fine, because so many of the performance mechanisms are not statutory, necessary in their nature, and have already begun to do a number of things at the university level to improve performance. I mean, SUNO announcing this week that for the first time in 51 years they're going to start admission standards. Will drive performance at that particular institution above the 6% graduation rate they've had in the prior years, which is just not acceptable, what we're trying to get after. So I think overall it was a success. We have amendments that I'm sure will come in appropriations, and Bodie can say something else too. The higher ed folks have been the most difficult to work with in the appropriations process. They are the least giving of information, and they make it very, very hard for the legislature to understand and the public to understand exactly how they spend their money, where, when, and how. And so I think it'll be a fairly rigorous discussion when we get to appropriations on the GRAD Act. And
I think so. That's what you said. I think it's on the head. It's many members on the appropriations. They find it very frustrating because they feel higher ed is the least forthcoming in transparency in how they spend their public dollars, and they would like to see more transparency in how those dollars are spent.
Right. I mean, last year is a perfect example. We heard the sky was falling in. They ended up taking minor cuts and ended up with no major change. They just kind of pieced it together, and it wasn't that bad, but you'd have thought we were, decimating higher education last year. I will say this too, I think it's important for you all to recognize. We had a conversation with some of the members of the press yesterday afternoon about the GRAD Act. The GRAD Act is not meant to replace the ARA funding that's currently in the budget. We have a short-term problem, financial problem in dealing with higher education, which is a big problem. It's $300 million in federal recovery dollars are being used in this year's budget, next year's budget for higher education. So in the cliff year, we're $300 million short in higher education. The GRAD Act by no means begins to raise that type of revenue. The fiscal note for the first year is $5.6 million. I mean, the GRAD Act is not about fixing the budgetary problem. The GRAD Act is about fixing the performance problem. In the long-term solution, in the long-term goal of making higher education far more productive for most importantly for the students who participate in those institutions. And so there were some questions yesterday, and we really got into it. This is not a budget fixing bill. This is a performance-based solution to a long-term objective. And it'll help a little, but very little, in the budgetary problem because of the way the ARA money has been applied in the budget.
Jim, can you go back for just 1 second on
Yeah.
the voting in the House? It seems like there's been a dearth of votes, dearth of people absent or not vote. 80 votes on the gun bill yesterday, or 85 maybe. Warren's going to have a problem with people voting 45 machines. Are you going to start enforcing the House rule of people who have machines have to vote, at the desk have to vote? Because people are sitting there and just not voting.